Welcome to the Together.eu Ireland podcast. We are a community of people who believe in democracy and who want to give it real meaning as the next European elections approach. Together.eu is a project funded by the European Parliament, dedicated to getting as many people as possible involved in the democratic life of Europe. It is a community of individual citizens across the EU. This week, we will be talking with Ciara O'Brien, a first-year student at Trinity College Dublin.
So welcome everyone. Welcome Ciara. It's great to have you on the podcast.
Thank you so much. It's nice to be here.
So Ciara, you're a first year student in Trinity, is that right? Yeah. Can you tell us a bit about your course, what you do, about yourself?
Sure. So I'm studying philosophy, political science, economics, and sociology. So what that basically means is that I didn't quite have to pick exactly what I wanted to do when I was in sixth year. I could pick the range, and then now that I've studied them a bit in college, I know more of what I'm actually getting myself into. So then next year I'm going to be doing sociology and economics. So I'm obsessed with all the different advocacy, I love all that kind of thing. So I decided to do sociology and economics because sociology kind of showed me the problems that I want to solve and the most important ones to solve are, and then economics is actually how I'm going to solve them. Because often sociology is a bit fatalistic with there's so many things wrong in the world, and actually economics shows you where the resources can be allocated to figure things out a little bit better. Philosophy just did my head in, that's safe to say. Yeah, so do lots of things around those kind of subjects outside of college. I probably spend more time working outside of college than I do in college. But yeah, I find this all really interesting. And yeah, I'm excited this is kind of what I want to do for my life. So I'm excited to get more deep into it.
Amazing.
I'm just fascinated, Ciara, with just the breadth and depth of stuff that you're involved in. It's just takes my breath away. It really does. I'm just curious about the spark. What was that kind of early spark in your life, or when you're growing up earlier, that kind of generated all of this interest in all of these really incredible areas, whether it's youth affairs, human rights, climate change for women, European affairs. Where did all that come from? It was a great house to grow up in. I can only imagine.
Yeah, I think so to be honest, my dad was always interested in politics, but that never really rubbed off on me, right? That never, not my thing. And I still to this day, if he'd be more interested in the doll. Yeah. I don't know the names of them. Okay, I do, right? But when I was 17, 16, I don't care. It's a couple of old men sitting around a table. I don't know what they're doing. I don't care, right? The thing that kind of took off for me, I think, was more around COVID, when obviously for youth there wasn't a lot to do. So I was in transition year at the time, so they're safe to say that I had nothing to do, right? We didn't even have class. So we had basically a year stuck at home. Our teachers did the best they could to some extent, but there really wasn't much to do, right? So I had a transition year history class, which was so exciting because my teacher, because you get free reign, right? There's no curriculum for transition year, right? So my history teacher was like, okay, we're going to do American slavery, start to finish. Perfect. And this is when the BLM movement is in everyone's ear all of the time, right? And that was really a thing among my age group. And then I found that kind of discourse really interesting, because to me, things that seemed really obvious weren't kind of translating. And I was getting a bit lost, right? So that kind of communication side of it became central to me. Me going, because a lot of the time I would have a conversation with someone and we would have the exact same values, we would have the exact same thoughts, and we'd come to directly opposite conclusions. And it didn't make sense to me. So I'd be talking to someone who was equally sympathetic to a movement, but they'd be like, yeah, but they're taking all our rights. I'm like, hang on a second. Hang on. And we'd kind of talk it through. It was a bit calmer. So then I got involved with more different campaigns. I like dipping my toe in all the different waters, figuring different things out, especially with the intersectionality of it all, that they all really relate. So in school, my school was more conservative than the average school would be. And I banged heads a few times there with the establishment, but they were very willing to listen to my unique perspectives on some of the things that were going on. So we had a case where I held a one-man boycott. That was one of my first advocacy campaigns, was I just stood outside. It's like, I'm boycotting this class. We had a case where Pride Week was brand, so I just like threw some pride flags up around the place. I was like, what are you gonna do? It's a rainbow, you know? Things like that. So I got really involved, not because I had someone modeling what I should be doing, but because I was like, I don't agree with that, and I'm gonna show them why.
Yeah.
I guess it was more spite.
Yeah, but there's just loads of energy, loads
Yeah.
of enthusiasm, loads of curiosity. Like that's
Yeah.
just brilliant. That's just fantastic in anyone of any, it doesn't matter what age you are, but those kinds of traits are, yeah, really
Thank
special.
you.
So yeah, well done, well done.
Thank you. That's really nice. Yeah, I guess you see that though. Maybe I'm more vocal and more able to put a CV together, but anytime I go to these events, everyone is the same. Like we're all, I wouldn't say interested, I would say obsessed. We've got a vision. And I think
Yeah.
that's maybe some people aren't quite so able to say, look, this is what I've been doing, and here are the list of all the things I've spent my time doing, but there are a lot of people doing that kind of thing.
Good, brilliant.
Yeah.
I'm just curious then, I guess, about, because obviously, this is EU year and it's elections and voting and really important time for everyone in Europe to vote. So how are you feeling about voting and your peers? I guess you'll be there voting. I've no doubt about that. You will definitely be voting. But your peers and your class colleagues and so on, what's the kind of vibe or what's the interest or around that business of voting?
Yeah, so I'll start off by saying I'm gonna have a biased view of this because I'm studying political science, right? So the people I talk to on a daily basis when I'm walking to class, they're also in the same mindset, right? For the most part. Um, I think there's generally a disconnect between I think the jurisdiction areas of the EU are quite complicated, and I don't think they're advertised very well. So I think people don't actually realize what they're voting for. Um, Whether it's farming, bear in mind I've grown up in the city my whole life. I don't really know anything about farming. I'm also vegetarian, so it doesn't really affect me for the most part. But I don't know anything about cattle farming. I don't know anything about, and to me it doesn't affect me. And I think a lot of my peers feel that way. A lot of us are vegetarian or vegan or whatever. We're hanging out in the city. We haven't seen a farm in ages, right? So maybe that part doesn't resonate with us, right? But we're at the stage where we're like, where am I going to go next year? Where am I going to go for my Interrail? Where am I going to go for my Erasmus? Where am I going to go for my, do you know, all this kind of thing? And I don't think people realize that like that's actually like subject to change. That's not something we should take for granted. And I had a really nice experience at NYCI, so the National Youth Council of Ireland, where we all got a little chance in groups to kind of, I was going to say interview, probably more interrogate some of the upcoming candidates for the MEP elections. And that was really, really interesting because I think some of the opinions that we got, I think, especially myself at the time, I was probably a little bit more naive with regard to actual EU jurisdiction. So we were like, guys, what are you going to do about housing? And they were like, not much. I was like, why? That's really important. And they were like, yeah, but it's not EU jurisdiction. And that wasn't really clicking with me, right? I think that was the case for a lot of us there. Because I was like, these are the important issues. And they were like, yeah, but there's nothing I can do about them, right? Which is true, right?
Yeah,
But
Yeah.
now at
so
the
that's what
same
you,
time,
yeah,
I
sorry.
had an interesting conversation with one of the candidates, who remain unnamed, who was discussing how youth shouldn't be involved in advocacy. Now that will never get my vote. That will never get my vote, right? Um, they were commenting on how I shouldn't vote. I was like, I actually am over 18. I will be voting. I think they thought I was like 16, but whatever. That kind of thing is really important to me, right? Listening really is the objective. So it was a chance to get an idea of their policies, their priorities, their experience, but also their kind of respectfulness. And I think a lot of the time when you put someone, because objectively, if you put me in front of any of the candidates, I am not senior. I am interning in a corporate. Do you know what I mean? I'm writing employee handbooks, figuring my way out. And oftentimes that doesn't like command respect, but then the people who give you respect anyway, that's really important because they're the ones who are going to actually listen to the voters, actually listen to the people who are electing them. So I think the manner of it was more important to me than their actual priorities because I felt that they could take the priorities of the people and actually communicate that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
I
it's just
can
interesting. You're going there. Go, please, there. Go.
I was just gonna say that this resonates with me a lot. I'm not that much older than you, but I'm still older than you. And I had also studied European studies. I finished my degree, I did my Erasmus, I did, all of that kind of stuff. And I also did an internship within the European Parliament as well. And just what you're saying, I felt that too. I felt as a young person, and I guess more specifically as I was like an intern and I wasn't like anybody, like I wasn't seen as anybody as such.
Yeah.
That does come across for some candidates, definitely more so
Yeah.
than others. But it's the awareness that we have from that is there, that it's like the awareness from the MEPs don't have that in what they're saying is quite alarming in some
Yeah.
ways.
I think as
Yeah.
well, like, isn't there's a saying, I don't know how to quote it, but it's like, don't look at how he treats his equals, look at how he treats his lesser thans. And I think that's really interesting.
Yeah.
And I'm used to in school and in activism circles and in work, being treated like an equal. And then when you come into a political space and then like you don't know anything, you're like, actually, let's have a chat about that. Let's, you know,
Yeah. Clearly,
uh,
I mean, there's no question with because I think in the first place, that's this or that or the other, or may not have this or
yeah,
that. That's completely disrespectful, but it's really probably a great reason why get out and vote.
Yeah.
Because that's what we're trying to do is get people out to
definitely.
vote. It doesn't matter how you vote, but just get out and vote because that'll make a difference.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I wouldn't say it doesn't matter. I think you should vote consciously. I think you should, I don't mind which candidate you vote for, but I think you should put the time into looking at them. Because I know a lot of the time, a lot of my friends actually come up to me and like, who should I vote for? I don't know.
Big responsibility
Who
there.
do you want to vote for? But they just want to cut out the step of researching because they know I've done the research. They're just like, yeah, you know what you're on about. We'll just tick that box. Like, no, that's not what's happening here.
Do you find
Yeah,
that a
that's
lot actually?
Do I find that my friends do that a lot?
yeah, coming up to you
Or
about voting and asking for your
or more
okay.
so say
Yeah,
the young
yeah,
people
yeah.
of today. I was just wondering if that lack of research and that asking, say, who should I vote for, and that lack of research, but maybe feeding into what we're seeing on social media and like being influenced more so in a different way rather than going out and doing your own research is it an issue, or are you seeing it a lot that people are following influencers and their opinions and are used to that sort of mindset than going out and like doing their own research? So they're just asking someone else, oh, how should I vote?
heavily on what topic we're talking about. So like I had a lot of very engaging discussions about like the recent Women's Day referendum, right? Because
Oh yeah.
the amount of stuff to understand was very minimal, and people could then go through that. It is very difficult to evaluate a full candidate and their history and everything everyone's saying about them and what they can do in the EU and what they have done in the EU or what they have done in the... That's a lot of work, right? So there is a big difference, right? It's not that people are not, but like a lot of my friends are doing full-time college and a job and volunteering or two jobs, or they can't pay rent, or they've other things on their mind, right?
Yeah.
No, I'm trying to explain that this is actually the same thing on your mind, because cost of living crisis can be addressed by the EU in some ways. But people just have other things to prioritize, and I understand that. So what I think is kind of interesting actually is I think young people know. So if we see like a nice little banner with some pretty colors saying young people, we're not falling for that, right? None of that crap, right? Give us your key points, right? And I read a flyer from a candidate. I don't even remember his name. None of my like jurisdiction, so can't vote for him even if I wanted to. But it was like, I'm gonna fix climate change. It's like, you're gonna do what now? And I think young people are very engaged with that. We're not falling for
No.
I'm going to solve. No, I want to know if you're going to put in windmills. I want to know if you're going to put in different types of sustainable energy. I want to know if you're going to involve degrowth in the fashion industry. I don't want to know that I want a 5-point plan. And I think a lot of people, especially around climate change, are very focused on that, because there's a lot of, for the most part, and especially in the climate crisis is a crisis, and we have to do something about it. And then the issue is what you're doing about it. So if someone says the climate crisis is important to me, that doesn't mean a lot to young people anymore. I want you to tell me what you're actually going to do about it. And I think that's very consistent. But then when there's a lot of mixed messaging around just politicians being politicians, I get not really saying what you mean, saying vague statements with grandeur and a fancy accent so that we can kind of, you seem authoritative and we'll do it. I don't know if that has the same appeal as before, because we're bombarded with so much of it that it just kind of loses its effect. It's not like there's one person who has fancy effects and their fancy language. That's very accessible these days, so we get a lot of it. So I actually don't think it's as partisan as it previously would have been. But I do think that young people are more preoccupied than like when they would have been, and just don't have as much time or energy to put into that research. And I think that's quite fair. It's why I think giving people time to hear candidates speak is much more important than reading a leaflet. Or I think something like a hustings is much more engaging and also productive for young people compared to, I don't like flyers. I don't want a flyer. And I also don't want a flyer being posted in my door that says I'm going to solve the climate crisis, because you
Yeah.
put this paper. Like, do you know what I mean?
Is there a lot of stuff in Trinity College about hustings and all kinds of stuff like that in terms of encouraging people to come out and vote? Is there a sense in the college that European elections are on, and that students are going to various events around the campus, or what's your impression?
So something that's important to mention about Trinity is it's a very international college. So like half of my course are not, like, I have 5 people from New York in my course of 60 people, right?
Okay.
I had never met someone from New York. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
We have a really, really diverse, I have a lot of people from India, America. Obviously they're not voting, right? And that's the case across campus, and also with all the tourists on campus, right? Because our posters appeal to them too. I think UCD is doing a much better job of promoting elections than Trinity is. I don't know if that's to do with their organizers or to do with their audience. I'd say it's probably a mixture of both. I'm biased. I know the organizers personally. I like them. They're good people. I think with the EU elections, it might be more difficult to get people to come in and speak, which is disappointing, I think. And also bear in mind that a lot of people commute very far for college. So getting a counselor in this area isn't necessarily important because very few as a percentage actually live in that area. Also a lot of people then are going to be registered to vote where they like grew up or where their family home is. And then if they're living in the city, you know. I think people aren't really mindful of that it's actually very important where you are registered to vote. Especially for if you're going to college or something. But no, there isn't that much of an atmosphere on Trinity around elections. Now, granted, we're finished classes, right? So our last day was Friday. Obviously we'll be around campus for exams or in the RDS for exams or wherever you're doing your exams. But for the most part, there isn't really a college community for mid-April until June, and that's when the key season for elections is.
Okay.
So
Okay.
do you know what I mean?
That's fair.
Yeah, absolutely. I suppose the other thing would be in terms of the messages to try and I mean, obviously from our point of view, we're trying to, arrange events, promote events. One of the things that I see in your LinkedIn profile, you talk about the European Parliament social media champion.
Oh, that was very fun.
We're really interested in social media champions. They really are, because obviously trying to get the message, just vote, please vote. Trying to get that is obviously organizing events on college campus or elsewhere is what we're trying to do, but it's still only a drop in the ocean. We're trying to. So, are you, in terms of your current, are you still involved very much as a social media champion with the European Parliament, or how's that going? Or,
yeah. So it's worth bearing in mind that I am in key exam season.
Okay.
So you'll catch me more on my social medias after my essays are due. This is the burden of student life. I have two essays due today. But you know yourself. So I've done the training. The TikToks have not yet been made. The TikTok account has been made. So I'm sure my friends noticed a change on my TikTok profile. But no, I post a lot on my personal Instagram account, which I guess is now not that personal anymore. But of just about like issues in general, and I think that's quite important because what I'll do, this is gonna sound really manipulative, it's not what I mean it like, but this is how I think of it, right? So I'm like, this issue is important, this issue is important, this issue is important, this issue is important, and this is how you fix them, which is quite nice because you drill in that. So you repeatedly post, this is important, this is important, this is important, here's your solution. And I think that's one of the things I was looking into. I recently did a global citizenship course. And it actually kind of annoyed me because I was like, this is so vague and like so impractical. Like, great, we can all sit around singing Kumbaya. Like, I don't care, right? That's not what it means. I want a 10-step program infographic explaining. I actually I've been upping my Canva skills. I've been trying to make infographics like there's no tomorrow. I'm not an artsy person. But I think that's how you do it. Once I figure out how to do it, I'll stop telling everyone else to do it. But it's like, make it easy, make it interesting, sure, but also just make it important. Make it important. Say your Interrail and your Erasmus is not guaranteed. Your study abroad, your move abroad, not guaranteed. Safety, cost of living, these are all issues by the EU. Even things like, it's important knowing like I'm studying economics, right? So we have the ECB and whatever, and I don't understand half of it, right? But that's the point. Do you know it's important? I really got to study for that exam. But you know yourself of like, it's more important to say that it's important, and then let people research it how they want to research it, right? I'm not telling you how to vote. I'm not telling you who to vote for. I am saying you should vote, you should look into it, and this is how you look into it. As in, I'm directing usually to the how to vote website. That was which is actually very helpful. If you literally just look up how to vote, it's an EU website. And it just kind of, I don't know, the process is quite intimidating. Like, I've only voted in the referendum coming up just recently because of my age. And EU and council elections are something totally new to me, as they are not only to my age, but a couple of years older because they're less frequent. So it's I don't know. I think the main thing isn't showing it's fun to vote, or no. Your life is impacted by the decision you make on this day. It takes you half an hour. You need to do it. This is why you should care. It's not about this is why you should vote per se. It's about this is why you should care, and then people automatically choose to vote on behalf of that, if that makes sense.
Yep.
I think one of the other important things is where you put them. So I know with myself, when I post something on my Instagram, anyone who doesn't like political content has already unfollowed me, right? They've already gotten fed up years ago, right? They're gone. If I can get my friends to repost, now if I get my activism friends to repost it, but if I get my school friends to repost it, I say, look, we were in history class in Leaving Cert, would you mind putting this up on your channel? It's really important for me. Then it's their friends. It's not an echo chamber of preaching to the choir. And I think that's why TikTok is really important, because you can reach like a much more generalized audience. Yeah. But yeah, no, at the moment I would be boycotting Twitter because of everything going on. It's not that pleasant a platform at the minute. But that can be really good to like reach a broader audience if you're not afraid of some backlash, which you will get.
I think I know we've got some work to do, and it's just a pity it's exam time, because you would be the perfect person to be getting involved with our group in some shape or form. But
definitely,
exams are more important, and they need to be looked after.
Well, I'm happy to help out how I can, right? But there's also European courts, right? And I think for young people, a lot of what will resonate is that's why David Norris won his case. That's why being gay isn't illegal in Ireland, is because of the European Union. And those kind of human rights violations. Now, admittedly, I'm wearing my Palestine pin, a lot of my peer group would argue that human rights in the EU aren't thriving at the minute. But there is that potential there. And we can, like, if there's someone you think we should boycott. So I personally wouldn't be a fan of trade with Afghanistan because of their gender apartheid, right? Say that, for example, right? This is the EU does trade sanctions. So if you're not happy with a human rights violation, no one cares what Ireland thinks, right? That's just the reality of it. We are not that important, okay? But if you put us in an EU platform, they care. That's really, really important. So even if you're just mad at the world, voting is how you make that voice actually heard. Even if that voice is telling them to, go away.
But that's really interesting, isn't it? Like what you're saying there, Ciara, in terms of the European audience versus the world audience. Like you have, in terms of the European audience, you have an ability to influence and change that by voting and by getting out to vote. Whereas on the world platform, really, it's, as you say, it's very difficult to make any progress. But that's just a really interesting and very strong and positive message, to get across.
Definitely.
Love that.
Yeah. And the way the US elections are going, Ireland is more important when the US has our back. Biden has our back, just about. I'm not advocating for Biden. I promise you I'm not advocating for Biden. Right, but Ireland is more important when the big guys with the military have our back. That is not guaranteed, right? That could change at the drop of a hat, right? The EU has our back. The EU has to have our back, right? So if we're actively involved, then we're making that change. We're not relying on some tedious, like, cultural relations. No, we have practical support from the EU, and I think we need to like reiterate that and engage with that more, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, couldn't agree more.
Definitely.
That whole piece around Europe is, that's where we are, that's where we live, they're the people that we see. So it's so important to make sure we continue to build strong alliances, connections, travel, education, climate change, whatever it might be, with all of those really important friends in Europe. Yeah, that's really powerful.
Yeah, without
Yeah.
underestimating like our power.
Yeah, on a European stage, it's got more. It's got a greater chance of being heard. There's no
Yes.
question about that. So
I
we'll have a
was gonna
turnover of
say-
75+% in Ireland.
And on that note, I guess
Okay.
we might leave our podcast for the day. And thank you so much, Ciara, for coming on, for chatting with us, for giving us your insight on the EU elections, on the youth of today, of everything that you do. It was incredibly insightful, that's for sure. And the very best of luck in your exams, of course. Fingers crossed for you going forward.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me on. And if you want to talk about the EU in the future, or if anyone listening wants to talk to me about getting involved in youth advocacy, I have a few contacts up my sleeve. I'm happy to get anyone involved.
Amazing.
Brilliant. Thanks, Ciara. Thanks very much.
Thanks
All the
so much.
best.